be talking about the books and the TV shows. So here is our universal spoiler warning. If you have not partaken in either of those mediums, you will be spoiled with this panel. My name is Hanako. I am the host and creator of the Fandom Hybrid podcast, and Shadow and Bone is one of the shows that we cover on the podcast. I am going to let my panelists introduce themselves, give us your name, where we can find you, and favorite character, book or show. So we're going to start with you. Let's start on the left and work our way down.
Anthony Liggins. I'm a co-host of the Fandom Hybrid podcast and sometimes contributor to Sci-Fi Party Line. You can find me on the fandomhybrid.com. Favorite character? Zoya.
Wow, that's bold
If you-
choice. It is a bold choice.
If you listen to the podcast, it'll make perfect sense why that's his favorite.
You have to listen to the podcast, you
Yeah.
understand.
It's going to be either Zoya or Nina.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
My name is Michael Collins. I am a co-host and theory extrapolator on the Phantom Hybrid podcast. You can find me on the Phantom Hybrid podcast as well. My favorite character, it's really a toss-up.
It is not.
No, it's not.
It's not.
No, it's not.
He's trying to be
Why
fair,
is he-
okay?
Why is he playing? I don't know.
What we do?
Nina.
I was gonna say Jesper.
Jesper, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Jesper's my dude. I like the fact that he gets to be like, he's messing up, then he just lucks into being in the right place at the right time. That was one of my favorite parts of this whole series. I was just like, he was out there like, oh, I messed up everything, and then she just happens to walk in and just go right into the scene, right into the show, just like perfect, yeah. So
Divine intervention.
divine intervention. Yeah, he's definitely my favorite.
Before we go on, who's your favorite?
Mal is my favorite.
Mal.
Yes.
Okay. I'm Sarah Brubaker, and I get to meet all these people for the first time. And I am also presenting for the first time at this CONjuration. I mostly am into the cosplay side of things when it comes to cons, but huge sci-fi fantasy nerd and everything. I think the doors may have locked. But my favorite character is Kaz.
Yeah.
This was particularly emphasized by the books because I thought he was an interesting character in the show, but then the books you actually got to learn about his backstory and stuff, and so that's where I was like, oh, okay, that's why he is the way he is. So he's my favorite.
I'm Jessa Phillips. I get to be media. I do podcasts, I do blogging, I do conventions. Mostly actually talk about race and gender in pop culture. My favorite character, I'm Team Darkling all the way. I mean, there's just so much there. Maybe you start with like just a flawed character and it just gets worse. Started with good intentions and it sort of gets perverted along the way.
And the more that you like him, the more you're questioning your own morality. You're like, am I the bad guy? Am I-
I'm Aquarius. I question that. I'm like, he was meant for me. That's all there is to it. But yeah, I mean, it's I would argue, our most complex character throughout the series, but when you get into like his backstory, like that wasn't always who he was, but also so smooth and charismatic that, right, he'll talk anybody into anything.
Oh yeah.
And he doesn't even need his powers.
No.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So, out of everyone in the audience, are you guys book fans, show fans? Like, how did you come to? I think we have a small enough group that we can like really talk. So, how many of you were book fans first? So everybody's here based on the show.
I didn't know it even existed until I saw the Netflix series. Like, oh, what's this?
Okay.
And then now I realized, wait, there's a book series.
Well, and
Let's
that's
explore.
the goofy thing for me was that I'm huge into the YA fantasy
Right,
side of things. I had heard fantastic things about the books for years. But on one of my, I went, oh, okay, what's this about? I read the back cover, and when they described the Volcra in the back cover, for some reason, my mind was like, oh my god, those sound like they're gonna be super graphic and like gory, and I don't do gore. And
Oh,
for
okay.
whatever reason, I literally ruled out the entire series because of
Really?
the way it was. And I went back and reread it after I watched the show, and I was like, why did this freak me out? Why did it's like, yes, they're scary, appropriately so, but like in a very fantasy way that's not like nasty or anything like that. I'm sure they're just eating people alive. Who cares?
Because I'm kind of the same way. I used to work for Barnes and Noble part-time, and so of course, you know, part of that job is, you know, setting up all the displays of the books. So I had seen them and had been interested in them, and I just never, there's so many, like, am I the only person who has like to be read pile that's like, okay, I didn't even have to finish the sentence. So it was one of those book series that I wanted to read, and I just never got a chance
bumped
to.
down the list.
And then I heard about a show coming out. I was like, okay, well, I may check that out. That first trailer, that show, it was nothing but the stag. The cinematography in that trailer alone, I was like, okay, I shared it in our group chat. I was like, okay, I don't know what it's about, but I'm in. And they all looked at the trailer, they were like, oh, we are definitely We had no
100%.
clue what it was about. And then once I started watching the show, like, I was one of those that was hooked from like, really hooked from the second episode. I think Anthony took like maybe 4 or 5
About
episodes.
4.
Like, we had this, like, there's this rule, you know, anytime you get into a new series, sometimes you gotta wait until like that 4th or 5th episode before it really starts grabbing you, because the first few episodes are kind of like character building, world building, just giving you all of this, you know, giving you all this information. You're like, okay, so why am I supposed to be interested in this? But this one, I would say the cast really got me. They did amazing with the casting, from Malina to the Darkling to, and I heard that he like really campaigned for that.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you for that. But and to the Crows, and I mean just everyone in that cast is like, when you think of some TV shows and the way they put people together, the chemistry is either on or it's off. Like, you can watch people do like really hard or really intimate scenes, and it might get a little awkward because the chemistry's not there. Like, I didn't feel that at all with this show. Like, I can't even think of anybody better to be in these particular roles, you know? And then, of course, the fact that the cast was so diverse, which is really, really different from the books.
Loved what they did with Malina for the show, because I watched the show first and then I binged the books. And when I started reading the books and they weren't describing her as being Shu, I was like, is this something that they're trying to like sneak in later or whatever? And then I realized, no, she's not Shu at all. She's just a white girl. And I'm like, man, that like lessens the richness of her character.
Yeah, I would say that I like the books, but I think the show, the visuals with the diversity of the characters and just everything with them, it just made the story so much better.
See, for me, outside of Harry Potter, this is about how much YA lit I read. If I'm in a YA lit section in the bookstore, it's because I happen to walk through there on the way to the bathroom. I really don't. And so I had no clue about the show, where it was. And like Hanako, I was on Netflix looking for stuff to watch, and I was like, Shadow and Bone, that sounds interesting. So I watched the trailer, and I was like, I'm a sci-fi person. I love fantasy. You know, sci-fi person. I have an obsession with magic systems. So when I saw the stag, I was like, oh, there's magic involved. I wonder how this is going to work. And so that's what drew me into it. But like I said, four episodes in before I was like, okay, this is okay.
I think the most unique thing about the magic system, because we've all seen elemental magic in a billion variations through fantasy, but the amplifiers were a fascinating part of it, and they become even more important as the books progress.
Oh my God.
And so to see how that flavors not only like, it makes your powers stronger, it can even almost change them. But I thought it was fascinating what they did in the show with making them tie the Darkling and Alina, and using that as a very powerful metaphor for his control over her, and then her gaining of her independence.
I mean,
It's almost as if she made the magic system just so she can have that element.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, it was literally like, it's so visual, like the way you get the stag's horn and you put it in her, and you get to put the other part in him, and it's just like a leash, like, he's like, all right, sit, speak, beg, shine. And it's like, it's so like, it was just really powerful. It was a really powerful way to put it and for people to see. And when she finally breaks free, it like really shows like you see she's entirely different now. So I think that was really cool how they did that. And but it's like it's a good way to hold your interest like towards the end, like because that was only like the third episode from the last one they did, the third second episode from the end when they did it. Yeah.
Like
So
he
it's
gets
like-
introduced earlier on, but it's like
just like
a mention.
casual,
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like just our librarian guy.
Yeah, to like physically see that
Mhm.
and to like have that visual of, okay, yes, I'm about to control her and this is how I'm about to do it.
Yeah.
So one, her having the collar like embedded in her flesh, that was so dehumanizing. And then for the way that he just basically was like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna control your power. This is, what I want for this country is more important than what you need. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna take your autonomy just so I can do what it is I wanna do. And it's like, we're gonna get into this. I don't understand how people can see that and even in the books read it and still ship Darklina. I don't understand.
There is a turning point though with Darklina. Because, okay, I'll admit I was Darklina for the first 4 episodes before I find out it's Evil White.
And this was like we went back and forth on the podcast, like arguing. I was like, no, this is toxic.
A huge part of that was because I love Ben Barnes, and so there was personal bias.
Yeah, we gotta separate.
But the
this.
other thing is that the book, I did not ship them at all. And the movie, I think they tried, because they knew that it was kind of this love triangle-ish in the series. I think the movies, they tried to make it a more believable love triangle, and they did give them some better connection moments, like when they went to that like well and he was kind of talking about his past or whatever. And of course later we see, oh, that's all a very strategic manipulation, but it seems very sincere. And so like when they like are kissing and all that kind of stuff, and she's giggling and she's just like, this is her first time feeling free and expressing this romantic interest and everything, because she liked Mal, but he never was interested in her. So this is it's much more believable, especially since she's only like 16. Like, of course this is going to be exciting and fun and everything for her. And then of course we thankfully very quickly get the realization of what's really happening so that we can separate from that.
Yeah,
See, I'm sorry.
You know what I'm saying? It's cute when you don't know that he's like hundreds of years old. And then you're just like, that's just.
See, he's good. He knows his story. He knows how to edit that. But I think that was another thing they did really good in the series was limiting the amplifiers too, because in the books, sorry, spoilers for the books, you'll find out there are more amplifiers, more people use them. It's a little bit more commonplace. And so in the series, leaving that behind and leaving it so as if Alina's going to be the only person to have an amplifier really does help solidify that relationship between the two of them. It seems like, of course that would happen. Of course, against her will, one way or another, it's going to happen. But it's a little bit more believable in tying them together as well, because it's not like you don't get this other background with other characters and how they work their amplifiers. So to have like that intense draw there and feel like she really doesn't have any sense of control after that, the series played that out brilliantly.
Yeah.
See, I couldn't ship him because he always seemed to look at her as like, you talk about this possession, like
Well,
he
see,
was,
when you're
he
younger,
belonged to her,
you
like
don't
he
see
was,
that.
he was a
Yeah.
thing, she was a thing for
Right.
him to have and to do stuff for, but he had, I think I said like a pet. Sort of, that was kind of affection he had for her, so any affection he showed towards her was really because, well, you're mine.
Well, very similar to Mother Gothel and Rapunzel.
Yes.
In that there is this appearance of love and acts that look like love and tenderness, but like with Entangled, every time she touched Rapunzel, it was her hair. So the same thing with the Darkling, when he is connecting with her, it's over the power. It's trying to draw out more of this power. And it is of course purely manipulative, but he's good at it. Like he's got that high charisma and he knows how to use it.
Well, and Alina's put in such a place of isolation already that it's like, this is the one, their entire life at that point. She's only had Mal, but now stick her in a foreign place with all these people who have this intense jealousy about her. And then you have this one guy, even Bagra, even though Bagra, we know, is really rooting for her, she doesn't get that.
She's the opposite. She doesn't show affection at all, but she does care. Like,
Well, and I mean, if you when you read the books, you will see Bagra's type of love towards like even her son. She's very toxic. It's like I was reading this and I was like,
Like, what are you dark?
Right, exactly. So, but as far as there was a point you were making about Kiergan and Alina. I think in the beginning for Kiergan, now I still think this, even going back and rewatching it, I feel like at the beginning, yes, his intention was just to use her for her power. I think once she started showing genuine affection towards him, he kind of changed a little bit, like, oh, okay, this is what this feels like. Because if you remember from the 7th episode, I think it was the 7th episode, he knew how to love before. He had a great love and that got taken from him, and so I think he kind of just blocked himself off. And when she starts showing a genuine interest in him, he's like, oh, okay, maybe this can work. But at this point, you've already been manipulative. You've already kept the letters that, you know, she and Mal were sending to each other. You've kept them from each other.
Yeah.
And then the thing I think that really cemented for me just what kind of trash he was when Mal finally made it to the little palace and he says, okay, go here, I'll check with her, and then I will bring you to her. And then you bring her the flowers, and then you go to seduce her while this dude is waiting. I was like, you know what, you're a garbage can.
It's a bonus. I mean, if he knows he's got to be in it for the long game, she's gonna be around for.
And I understand that, but if you know that and if you feel confident about that, get on an even playing field.
Well,
Just let her know, okay, hey, Mal is here, he wants to see you. And let her have that confrontation and see how, because that actually does happen in the books.
Right.
Like, she actually does see him. They have a confrontation and then they go their separate ways because, of course, they're 16, 17.
Right.
There's
Misunderstanding. Like, I wrote to you didn't write to me.
Yes.
Right. And then, of course, at that age, they don't know how to express their feelings. Like, Mal's like, okay, I've always felt something for you, but I didn't know it was this because, they were raised together. So it probably was kind of like, okay, we were raised together. It might seem weird, but
Yeah, but his friends know. His friends are basically like, dude, you really like her.
That's always like that.
Yeah, they're always like,
There's that fear.
But they needed to get out of like the Duke's house to get to the art, have some distance.
Until you just be happy for what you already have.
Yeah.
So I can understand that fear. But then again, if you wait around too long, you miss the change.
Then she's gone.
And
Right.
and it's just manipulated. It's like, this is just
but I think you hit on something.
Right, you can see the warning signs.
He was 1,000 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was like hundreds of years ago, he lost the love of his life. He closed that part off of him. And so it's been so long since he knew what it was like to have a functioning love relationship.
Right.
When it
Just
starts
any kind of
happening,
love. Because him
He
and
doesn't do it for his
Afra,
mother. He
it's
does.
definitely not.
So I can see how he was trying to imitate what Mal was doing. Because I guess he thought maybe this is how it's supposed to be. Because he had forgotten.
He's basically treating it as getting intel and acquiring the target and conquering the target. He's not really thinking of it as, oh, I'm going to impress you because I really like you and I want to have a relationship. It's like, okay, I have the intel, I'm going to use the intel. Once the
There's
intel
emotional
works,
distance.
right? Yeah.
Because even when he talks about it later on, when he's talking to Mal, he's like, you're going to be gone in a few years. We'll both be around forever. It's still not a, I love her and this is why I want to be with her. It's, okay, well, there's nobody else.
Exactly.
And people do the cringy thing when they think about his age versus hers, and we get this with also like Twilight with Edward and Bella. But I'm like, realistically speaking, if they're hundreds of years old, they're really not gonna find anybody in their age group today.
Right.
Right.
And one of the comparisons is you have the Darklina and Malina, and then you've got Kaz and Inej. And people make comparisons about both the Darklina and Kaz being these pretty dark, intense, emotionally distant characters. And how both of them, we want to see a redemption arc. We want to see them learn to open up and learn to connect with another human. The difference being, Kaz is 16 and the Darkling is not. And that's kind of where we want to see that same trope with the Darkling. I think that's why a lot of people have that ship, because they want to see redemption. They want to see him learn to love again, all that kind of stuff.
No, he had his chance.
But it's too late at this point. And it's not even like with Edward in Twilight. He's only like 90 years old as opposed to like thousands.
Right.
So.
Yeah, he's perpetual high school student.
Yeah, and he's also stuck in that stage of development where the Darkling is not.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about this in the podcast. We had talked about people are stuck emotionally where the most traumatic event happened in their life. For Edward, becoming a vampire was fairly traumatic.
Yeah.
So he's stuck at.
Stuck on that one.
Right, he's stuck. And I'm thinking maybe that happened to Kerrigan. If
Yes.
Vibrant has always treated him that way when he was
I look
Yes,
at him,
when he
he's
was a
stuck in that moment
teenager.
of grief where
Yeah,
he
he's-
creates the folds.
Right.
And he just can't move past that.
or even before that, he's stuck at even though he was showing that he cared for this woman, he's still stuck at like a teenager looking for his mother's love, but he never got it. And so he's stuck emotionally as a teenager and adolescent as well. So we have all these traumatized people. Kaz the same way. He's stuck emotionally where he was traumatized as a little kid.
Which, and show-wise, we still don't know what that is.
Right.
And I have read,
But I mean, you can look at the character. Inez is the same way. She's still trucking her.
Yeah.
We know more about her.
You know, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have all these characters who have all this trauma.
They're having a rough time.
Yeah, but
I
think the
miss that
Grishaverse is
panel
not
yesterday about mental health in fiction.
Oh,
Someone
okay.
didn't have this album.
Yeah. But I think the difference between like Kerrigan and Kaz is they both have good intentions as far as their people. Like, if you really think about it, yeah, Kerrigan is a bit of an ass, but he's doing it because he's trying to liberate the Grisha. He wants them to not be scared for their lives anymore. He wants them to be, if maybe not equal. Probably thinks that, okay, we're a little more powerful.
I
so
think
we
once
should
upon a
be
time, he
on
just
top of
wanted
the
to
food
be
chain.
equal,
But
Right.
he's really fighting for the Grisha. Like, the whole reason the fold even became a thing in the first place is because the Grisha were being hunted down and being killed off, and he was just like, okay, you know what? Yeah.
Also, he's Magneto.
And Voldemort.
Yeah.
It's long game Slytherin planning.
It's just missing the island.
Yeah. But, Kaz, I feel like even though he is emotionally distant, you can tell, especially in the show, he cares for Jesper, he cares for Inej, and he's gonna do whatever it takes to protect them. But I think there's a limit to where he's willing to step over the line, whereas with Kerrigan, there's no line, So I think that's the difference with those characters.
Well, I think it also has to do with the scale of their goals, because Kerrigan's looking at whole world, multi-country kind of goals here. Kaz is like, I
just need some money in my pocket.
exactly. I care about, like you said, I care about these two people. I care about my club. And like, that's it.
Right. Like, I'm just looking for a million Kruger. That's it.
I think he just has a different way of showing affection to people. He has a different way of showing you're my family, which is not the affection and loving and caring and providing for you. Is I'm creating an opportunity for us to succeed, right? And that's his goal, is to make sure everyone around him is as successful as he is.
Right.
And the only thing is, I think for him, the line gets blurred between setting everyone up for success and making sure that he doesn't fail. And sometimes that's at the cost of how he treats the people around him. And that makes him similar to Kerrigan in that way, is that people become objects for you to achieve your goal, as opposed to being on that path with you.
Well,
And I think they both kind of struggle with that. Well, Kerrigan doesn't struggle anymore Everyone is a tool for him to
Yeah.
get
Yeah,
caught.
that's just it.
It's just that
Kaz
Kaz-
still has some relationships,
Mhm.
some people he cares about. Here he doesn't have anyone.
Right,
No.
I would say, yeah, that's for me the primary difference between them. It's like, I think Cass will do whatever he has to, but he wouldn't necessarily force his family further than they can. He still uses them as a tool and, you know, they get injured. But
like Michelle,
he
when
never
realized
goes
their
into
plan
it.
wasn't working, he was like, we're done.
Yes,
It's not gonna
right,
work.
yes.
It's
Like,
done.
that's your line, all right, we're not gonna cross it. It's a little sketchier in the books, but, but he always goes into it realizing like, yeah, we might get hurt, it might not turn out the way it's supposed to, but in the end, we will get out of this. You know, so he's always planning that idea. You know, we're all gonna make it through together. Well, my family, not the other people. Because he picks up other people to use his tools on the way, but, you know,
Yeah, I love-
that deep connected family, the three of them.
I love the way that they showed in the series how they got to the little palace. The whole little palace scenario was just awesome.
That was awesome.
Especially with him knowing that the conductor was up to some shenanigans, like
Yeah.
trying to kill
Yo.
Nina. Like he figured it out. He knew. He was like, okay, well you go do that and I'll go do this. But in his mind, he had already figured out he already saw what was going to happen. Like he was going to go in there. He probably wasn't going to kill her. If he killed anybody, he was going to kill the decoy. He was going to get caught, and then Alina somehow was going to get away. So he really didn't figure out the end part of that. I mean, he didn't really take into account Jesper's like serendipitous dumb luck. But it's still like the way they showed the way he thought, like his thought process and how he planned and knew exactly what was going to happen was just, I mean, that was just really high level planning on his part, and that whole sequence was just awesome.
And I appreciated how they did that in the series, where he's the only one with that knowledge and he
Right.
doesn't tell anybody else.
Right.
Because it was
Because that's
just
very true to how he is in the book.
So I was
It's
gonna
frustrating
ask,
to his
because
family.
Cass in the show is like, he notices things nobody else notices. And I'm guessing that's
He's
why
hyper
he's.
aware. Yeah.
He's like the high functioning sociopath that
Yeah.
Sherlock.
Okay, so, but that also explains why he's successful as young as he is with his business, but it's like, the way that whole scene unfolded with him doing the Lynx flush, and it's like, as soon as he
Yeah.
said Lynx flush, it's like Inej and Jesper both looked at him like, like, why are we doing this? And then once they figured it out, Inej was just like, so you just knew? And he was like, well, you know, I saw the decoy, I saw the two dresses and blah, blah, blah. And she's just like, oh, okay. But what if it wasn't Arthur? What if he wasn't? But he was. That's the thing. Like, he was about to sell all your
That is
career.
the true
I mean,
frustration for them. Like, he's just like, no, trust me. And they're like, we want to trust you, but can we
Don't
get
tell us
clear?
anything. Yeah, that happens a lot in the books. Cause so what I like about the Six of Crows duology is it's all heist, and I am here for
Oh.
heist.
I love that.
So very different stylistically, because their first trilogy is a pretty classic fantasy. It's mostly focused on magic, big world-changing stakes and everything. The Six of Crows duology is much smaller focused, and it's literally planning and strategizing. The first book is one giant heist,
Oh, wow.
and the second book is a series of smaller heists, all to one end. So it's very the author actually said that she wanted it to be Ocean's 11 but with magic.
Oh,
And that's
I
exactly how it
definitely
feels. So
need to
he's
know.
Danny Ocean. He's the one who's got everything figured out, has all the connections, but he's only gonna reveal to each person what they need to know in order to make it happen.
It
When
almost
you
gave
think
me,
about it, it's to save everybody also. Like, if one person's nabbed, like, that's okay, you don't know what the plan is.
Yep.
We'll get you out, don't worry about it. But in the meantime, everybody else is safe.
He seems to be
Yeah.
a person that's like, you know, I remember this, don't underestimate the other guy's greed, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Well, and that's just it. Is we saw a hint of it in the show, Pekka Rollins.
Yeah.
We know that he has this history with this other kind of like gang leader, but we don't really know what it is.
can't wait for them to get into that.
Oh yeah, and so the whole thing is very Inigo Montoya. It's all revenge,
Gotcha.
right?
Okay.
And so that's basically the only emotion he feels. It's revenge, it's hatred.
Which we know, like, the rest of the backstory, you understand. Like,
Right.
oh yeah.
Right. And so I was fascinated at how they integrated the Six of Crows cast into because the plot is just from What's in Shadow and Bone, the book, like the overall plot. everything with the Six of Crows character was new content. Like
Wow.
that.
Okay.
That's what was the coolest thing to me when I read the books after the fact. I'm like, oh snap! Like Six of Crows takes place a year after the events of the first trilogy, so we got to see all of the characters very much like embodied as they are in the books, but their plot line didn't exist in the books. So that was so
I
fun.
was wondering how they were gonna do that because
Yeah.
when they first announced like all the press and they're like, yeah, it's gonna be the two. I was like, okay. Because watching the series, so if you watch the series first, which it looks like everybody did, and then you go to read the books, and then you read Childlike Boner and be like, well, where are all these other people?
Yeah, I was gonna ask
Like,
you, aren't
they're in the other
there
book.
team members who are Six who are not in the show?
So the Six Crows, we've already met Kaz and Edge and Jesper. Nina and Mattias are also from that duology. And then we've got one more character who wasn't introduced in the show yet. So what was interesting is because when you watch the show, the Nina and Mattias stuff feels very set apart. Like it's literally in a different setting. They managed to link it in just enough to see why these characters are there. But it's like they're literally in a different country, like doing
It's like a different show.
And so I was fascinated they put that in, but that is told through flashback in the Six of Crows books. So it's cool they managed to actually get it to line up with the timeline of this is actually when it would have been happening, even though in the books you don't read it until that second duology.
Okay.
Which actually I liked it better in the series than like how because I'm in the book, the flashbacks for me are very disconcerting because it's told from the present day as the heist is going along.
Yeah.
The only thing that's different is Nina and Mattias are in the Crows from like almost day one.
Okay.
Whereas in the series, they go off and they go find them. I mean, that does still happen in the books, but you spend a lot more time with them all together. Whereas in the series, there's the
They
little
were
jump to go get them. We get Nina and Mattias' backstory, and that's easier because it's all told together. So you're getting that sort of like as it happens for them, and then they join up with the Crows.
See,
Whereas in the books, it's told through the flashback as we're on the heist, and so it's a little bit more difficult to get all of that.
that's really interesting how they did it because I have to admit she is right. Nina's one of my other favorite characters in this book. She was awesome. But the story of Nina and Mattias, the way they tell it in the series is so freaking heartbreaking. Like they make it through all that stuff, a sinking ship, almost get put in an ice hole. Then they finally get there and they're having a nice breakfast and like and then he falls asleep. And you're like, oh hell. Because they were right there.
That's one couple that I have no problem shipping because
Either, yeah.
like their tensions are all over the way they've been raised, and you can tell that their personalities work.
Especially Mattias, because I think they did on purpose. They probably did. Mattias kind of gave me kind of like more almost Mormon like vibe,
Almost
really
like being raised in
strictly-
a cult type thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was just like really just I was like I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, and he was like no you don't.
Every step of the way.
Yeah.
So that's a good segue into the next part. Ships. Do you have favorite ships? Do you have favorite ships in the show?
Mine's still
Other than Nina
Martina.
Yeah, Nina and Mattias.
I mean, Kaz and Inej is my like.
Oh my god. I need Kaz and Ned to like
See,
just get it
You see,
together.
I get it,
Yeah.
and they would be awesome together, but they would still be going at each other like constantly.
But like
because
they both
Books
need
don't
that.
they get together? He just kind of says, "Well, shall we get married? Let's get married." He has touch phobia, you know. His character has touch phobia.
Okay.
That's why he says gloves.
Oh,
So
okay.
they-
You want to know the backstory? My daughter's cosplaying him today, so.
Oh,
Really? Oh my
Tell
god.
her to come in. We need pictures.
So I don't know if she's dressed it, but she's doing cats. She's,
Okay.
Oh, that's
She has
awesome.
the, you ever see she's got the crow cane.
Wow.
He was on a ship, and the ship fell apart. I think it fell apart. Bodies were dead. He had to make a raft out of dead bodies.
Not quite.
And ride
Wow.
them. Is that it? So-
No, not quite. You're on the right track, but basically, and they do introduce this right away in the second duology, so it's not a huge spoiler. But the whole thing was with Pekka Rollins is that he duped Kaz and his brother. He had a brother when they were both, I think, 11 and 13. into giving every single penny that they had left because their parents had died. They had a little bit of money to try and make it. And Pekka screwed them out of their money. And because they were completely broke, Kaz and his brother both got deathly ill. There was this huge outbreak of plague. And they were both thrown onto a mass grave that was in the water. So they're on an island, and basically there were so many people dying. They piled up all the bodies in the water. They thought Kaz was dead, and he had to use his own brother's corpse as a raft to make it back to shore. So the feeling of skin on skin.
Oh my God.
Is so abhorrent to him. So that's why he has the gloves on, and he can't even like punch someone. It can't even be in a violent circumstance, or he will be absolutely thrown back with PTSD, let alone something tender and caring.
Wow.
So they had already lost their parents and had to make it on their own.
So the whole Pekka thing is like huge. So it's one of the most traumatic backstories I've ever read in fiction. And it's just like, okay, I get it. Like, I'm here for the revenge.
Yeah, kill him.
I also want to see you recover from this.
Yeah.
Because it's so awful. But he's continuing to live in this gritty, grimy, every man for himself, island that just like is basically fantasy Vegas.
Right, exactly.
And that's why on the show he says, he tells Peck, you don't recognize me, do you?
Mm-hmm. That's just it. He's like, you don't even remember ruining my life.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you, he gets revenge and it's so satisfying. It's so satisfying, but I won't say how it happens, but like, oh.
Cool. Okay, so let me ask.
I have no ships.
I know you. Not even Nina and Mattias? I'm so
Really?
Do you not have a heart? Which is no one
Yes,
ship Alina and Mal?
Oh, excuse me. That's
like nobody.
That's my
ship.
I think even though I don't think they met, Inej and Zoya might make a good pairing because I think they have a lot in common.
I can see that.
I can see that.
I can definitely see
I
that.
feel like they.
But I feel like they would butt heads a lot.
Yeah, like we're in a two-year-old team, and
I feel like they would be like this, like all the time, like.
It'll be a love to hate.
unless they work together, and then it's like just
It's
slow.
explosive chemistry.
Actually, that could be interesting if they were ever put in the same place at the same time.
But I don't think they ever are.
They have one scene in the
Except for
show.
the one scene in the show where they're fighting after Kiergan kind of sets the darkness against Novakrbis, and the Volker are attacking.
Okay.
I think Inej comes to Zoya's rescue or the other way around. But
They kind of help
fight
each other, yeah.
And they're even at that moment they're like kind of throwing shade at each other. But they're still fighting together because, at this point Zoya has I guess not necessarily changed sides, but you just saw the person that you follow destroy the town where your family lives. So she was like, okay, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna tell.
So they had that in common. They lost him. I can see a path for them to become, a couple.
I can see it, but I don't know. They both have strong personalities, and they both. I don't know, I just feel like they be going at each other all the time. Like, it will be one of those relationships where, yes, they're together, and they, they're good together, but they're also like, I feel it being really toxic.
I feel like it would be better as
Especially if you know Zoya's personality in the books. That would never happen because Inej would be kicking her ass all the time.
I feel like it'd be better if it's like, okay, Zoya is in control of this thing, and Inej is in control of this thing, and they coordinate, but from afar.
Because Inej is already used to dealing with like grimy people. And
Yeah.
Zoya has been one, but she also was following a cause that she believed in. So.
Well, and Zoya's so invested in the fate of the Grisha.
Yeah.
And Inej doesn't give one
Yeah,
rat's ass.
They play down Zoya in the series for
Yeah.
sure.
I think Inej still is all about getting closure as far as finding out what happened to her family.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think that's most important for her.
Yeah.
So.
My favorite ship is Jesper and the goat.
Yes!
Yes, that's awesome.
My
That's
love!
awesome.
My love is
And
He survived.
I actually hear that they are putting Milo in the second season.
Excellent.
Every series he's a mascot.
Yes.
That doesn't die.
Yes.
That whole scene on the train
Yes.
was just
coach
amazing
was
because you got
really
Jesper sitting here and Arkin's like, hold the goat. And he was like, I don't want to hold the goat. And then afterwards you see Jesper and he's like, he comes out like he's Clint Eastwood. He's just like, bam, 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 bam. What? And I was like, okay, this just cements Jesper is one of my favorite characters. Just the way that he comes through, like, Jesper has his flaws, yes. My baby has his flaws. But when it comes, I have a thing about sharpshooters in movies now, I find. And just the way that he was just so precise.
Yes.
And
He learned the tricks, and
Right.
they were originally gonna CGI him.
Yeah, no, he said he actually spent hours, learning those things. And I'm just like,
What I think
I'm
is,
here for it.
go ahead.
Okay, speaking of Jesper, do you guys, we were going into a theory that Jesper is actually part Grisha.
I
Because of how good he is at shooting.
Yeah.
We were thinking that he was probably what's the name of the mechanical Grisha?
The materialness.
Material. We were thinking that he might be a materialist because of the way that he can control his guns and control the shots that he takes.
You got me fascinating.
I mean, it sort of becomes obvious when they talk about the locks, if they can move the locks open. You're like, oh, so he's actually moving the bullets. So.
Yeah, that's what it is.
The obsession with magic systems over here. Obsession with magic.
Amazing what an intention can do for you.
And on top of it all, you know that they miss kids in their tests. So they missed.
And not only that, but you remember there was the mom who's kind of smuggled her Grisha daughter away because she didn't want her daughter to become part of the First Army, and that could be the same thing with Jesper. I think what I do know about him is that he's a university student who kind of leaves university, and then his father comes looking for him. So I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting to read.
Right.
Well, and he is from another nation, so the rules about Grisha are different in the different countries.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is part of it as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're saying he's a Grecian?
I didn't say nothing.
Your lack of commitment to
We can read on that.
No, he's definitely not a Grisha. No. I think that he has ADHD, and shooting
Right.
is the one thing that
That
focuses
focuses
him.
him.
Yes.
That
And
makes
I
total sense.
love that as a very healthy, fun representation
He's such a
of
pure character.
Yeah.
Like, he's just.
I mean,
Especially when you
that's-
can change the direction of the bullets. That makes a lot.
Because that scene where he's fleeing from the I think it was Ivan, wasn't it? That he was fleeing from Ivan,
yes.
and he was and he
Yes.
was listening to
Right.
where Ivan was, and like listening.
yes, yeah.
I was just like, he's gotta be Grisha. No,
There's no way he's hitting the same spot
Exactly.
from every angle. The same exact spot on the couch.
Like there has to be something to that.
It has to be.
I would like to fangirl for one moment over the Keftas.
Okay, so
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They are so gorgeous, and I want to make one, but it would take forever.
okay, well, if you decide to do that, you let us know. Because we were thinking about it like for Dragon Con. We were like, let's gotta be some Keftas, and then that just didn't happen. So we're like, well, we still have next year.
Right, so you have to pay somebody to make one.
Oh my God, they are so amazing. Before we close out, any comments from the audience? Anything that you want to say? I know we've been kind of up here running our mouths, but.
My daughter's getting ready for casting.
Oh,
Yay.
That's awesome.
Nice.
All right, well, since you all were here, we're gonna give you some house points.
Oh, I was told that I was supposed to say this. So I made my daughter watch the first episode, and she took notes, and I was gonna make it and give her a quiz. She predicted the majority of everything that happened over the season.
Nice.
Nice.
I will say that the first trilogy pretty clearly follows the typical YA fantasy tropes, which is why I like the second duology, and then I was like, I don't know what to expect. This is all out the window.
And I had a suspicion that Mattias and Nina would join because, again, obsession with fantasy. Whenever you have a quest, you have certain characters that
Yes.
fit.
Yes.
And I'm like, they were missing those two.
Yeah.
The Sister Crows.
You need the barbarian.
The barbarian.
And I don't know where Nina would fall in as far as I guess just having a magic user in the Six of Crows
Right.
that's like kind of wizard, sorcerer.
It was sorcerer
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
That would be her.
But okay, that's all the time we have. Thank you guys for coming. This has been a lot.